This time we're gonna cover a new lesson, a very important lesson actually, a very important lesson. So we get so excited because we are about to do data analysis in order to address our research questions. So a very important moment gonna arrive. But before we embark on data analysis in SPSS, the last step is to check data entry errors. Data entry errors are the result of mis-keying in the data, misinputting the data that we collect from the respondents. In particular, when we are exhausted or we, go too fast with doing data entry, with inputting the data into Excel and import them into SPAS, the possibility of entering or inputting wrong data is very high. In addition to that, data entry errors are very likely, in particular when we administer, our questionnaire in hard copies to the respondents to fill in. This is in contrast to a situation where students or teachers or researchers employ Google Form or Microsoft Form in order to collect the data by sharing the links to the respondents. So, mistakes, data entry errors are minimized when we adopt such a cloud-based, platform. In certain situations, actually, in many situations, researcher, distribute or deliver the hard copy questionnaires to the respondent to fill in, and then they verify possible mistakes, they assign the codes, and they start data entry into Excel manually. And I want to repeat, before we can perform any data analysis, the last step is to verify potential data entry errors. In order to do that in SPSS, only a few clicks are necessary. So we're gonna go to a few commands. Okay, we're gonna go to Analyze. We go to Descriptive Statistics, and we select Descriptives. And then we're gonna highlight everything. Okay, we're gonna highlight everything. So now the first item is highlighted. We're gonna use the shortcut Control A, and we see the arrow pointing to the right. So we are going to move all the items on the left to the right by clicking on the arrow here. So before we click OK, let us go to Options. So in the Options sub-menu, already ticked for us, include mean, standard deviation, minimum, and maximum. So we are going to click Continue, and we click OK. Now we are ready to inspect item by item. Let's go to the first item, gender. We know that there are 54 participants or respondents in this research. Yes, N stands for sample size, and minimum number or minimum data is 0 because we code 0 for male, and maximum is 1. And the mean and the standard deviation. For now, we are not going to look at mean and standard deviation in order to speed up the process. So we look at the two magic numbers, the most important numbers, allowing us to to tell whether all data were input correctly or not. So there's nothing wrong with gender. All data, were properly input because the codes 0 to 1 do not exceed the range, and you remember our range is 0 the lowest and 1 the highest. So for student status, minimum is 3, maximum is 3. You might say this is wrong. If you still remember, all 54 participants in this study are year 3 students, and we code 3 for year 3 students, so it is very reasonable. So there is nothing wrong with data entry. If we go to age, minimum is 1, maximum is 3. As you may still remember, if we go back to the questionnaire, we have a code of 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the range is from 1 to 4. However, if we look at the SPSS descriptive statistic, we learned that minimum is 1, maximum is 3. This is okay, this is correct, because no participant tick the last option, 30 years old or older. It is reasonable because they are year 3 learners, and therefore they look quite young. Okay, they are quite young, so there's nothing wrong with this one. GPA minimum 1, maximum 5. It is correct because we have 5 response categories for the participant to select. 1 representing the lowest GPA and 5 representing the highest GPA. So the codes of minimum and maximum here are within the range. So reading during vacation 1 to 5 also within the range, so correct. As well, reading while still taking courses, minimum 1, maximum 5, so this is totally fine. If you had more free time, would you read more? 0 to 1, this is totally fine because we coded 0 for no, 1 for yes. Reading newspaper 1 to 3, totally fine. Magazine 1 to 3, totally fine. Comic books 1 to 3, totally fine. Poetry 1 to 3, totally fine. Reading letters, emails 1 to 3, totally fine. Reading the internet material 2 to 3, also totally fine because you remember 1 for rarely never, 2 for sometimes, and 3 for frequently. So no participant selected rarely never. So the range of 2 to 3, the codes of 2 to 3 are within the range of 1 to 3. Reading novel 1 to 3, reading non-fiction 1 to 3. So great job. Data entry was properly done in this research study. So that is a very good job. What happens if we inspect data entry error like this, and there are certain mistakes for certain items, certain variables? How are we going to fix the problems before we perform any data analysis? So let me intentionally introduce 1 or 2 mistakes so that I can demonstrate how to fix data entry error. I have already introduced a few mistakes intentionally in order to demonstrate. Let us access a minimum and maximum again, the 2 numbers the two magic numbers allowing us to detect possible data entry errors in the whole data set, right? In the whole data set. So we're gonna go to Analyze, Descriptive. As before, we are going to Control A and then move all the items to the right. We're gonna go to Option and double check mean, standard deviation, minimum, and maximum. We're gonna click on Continue and on OK. Let us try to save time by going to the mistakes that I introduced intentionally. So I intentionally introduced two mistakes for gender 0 to 2. So it is impossible that 2 is the correct data entry because we assign a code of 0 the lowest and a code of 1 the highest. So a code of 2 for maximum is not within the range. So we know that there is something wrong with data entry. Okay, there's something wrong with data entry, and we need to go and find the mistakes and fix the mistakes. So there's one issue with gender, and I intentionally introduced another mistake related to GPA 0 to 5. We know that there is something wrong with data entry. Why? Because we provided 5 response categories to the respondent to choose one option, and we coded 1 to 5, 1 minimum and 5 maximum, and therefore a code of 0 actually stays outside the ranges, and therefore it is wrong. So how can we fix the issues of data entry error? It is a little bit different. You remember last time when we corrected mistakes in the code book, we correct them in the variable view, right? We corrected those mistakes in the variable view. Oppositely, since the mistakes that we are checking right now are related to data entry issues, we're gonna go to data view, and we know that there are 2 variables that we made the mistake. So we're gonna highlight gender. There are many ways to do this, but I'm going to use the conventional approach, the traditional approach. I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to scroll a little bit and inspect any potential number in this gender column that is unusual, that stays out of the range. So now we know that respondent number 10, there's something wrong with respondent number 10. We coded 2. We entered 2 rather than 0 or 1. But how can we know the true gender, the real gender of participant number 10? And then there is an issue with GPA. We're going to highlight that, and we scroll quickly because we know the range of GPA. It's from 1 to 5. Anything outside the range gonna be wrong. So by scrolling we can see that this is the issues. Okay, 0. It must be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. We just don't know, but we know that the mistake we made with data entry error is for respondent number 20. We ask ourselves 2 questions. Number one question is this: how can we know the actual gender of respondent number 10? Because we input the data wrongly. And another question is, how can we know the actual GPA of respondent number 20? Well, this is a very interesting set of questions. In order to fix the problem, in order to know the actual gender of respondent number 10, and in order to know the actual GPA of respondent number 20, there's only one way, okay? There's only one option. You remember, many weeks ago, or when we talk about the need in order to assign an ID to each respondent, right? We assign an ID, for example, 001 for the first respondent, 002 for the second respondent, 003 for the third respondent, until we have assigned, one ID, okay, numerical ID to the last respondent. So in order to answer these two questions, we need to go back, to the questionnaires filled in by the participants. Specifically in this context, we need to go back to questionnaire number 10, which we have assigned an ID, 010, right? And we need to go back to respondent number 20 because we have assigned a code of 020 to that participant, and then we can see the GPA of him or her, and we can see the gender of of him or her as well.